Right, so that picture, is that an accurate representation of what Labour's going to do to the countryside if they get in?
I think it's very accurate. I think, you know, hunting, net zero, you've got shooting and conservation, all of these things don't really fit into the politically correct urban party that Labour is. And so, I mean, if the polls are to be believed, you could see a majority, you know, 400 seats for Labour in the House of Commons. What are they going to do with all those MPs, you know, because they're, you know, I've had 14 years in the House of Commons. They're usually quite bright people, they're very ambitious, whatever party they represent, so they've got to find something to do. They can't be all ministers because they won't have enough places, and so I think it's very, very worrying. In the whole 40 odd years of my political career, I've never known anything like it, the threat to the countryside.
Okay, but for the last 5 years, you know, you have to admit the Tory party was more urban than Labour.
Yes, but you've got to remember that the Tory party starts from the countryside and moves into the city. Labour does the reverse. What Labour says before it comes to power and what it does in power is totally different. And I think what you've got to remember is you're going to have a party left over. A lot of members of Parliament will be from the Corbyn era. I mean, the countryside, shooting, conservation, hunting, it just doesn't fit their agenda. I mean, yes, all right, the Tories, I'm going to say for one moment, have been perfect, far from it, and many of the policies I disagree with myself, but I tell you what, you wait until you've got this new Labour government. You leave it 6 months, a year, you interview me again, and then we'll see who's right as to who and what they represent.
All right, it is my job to try and get you to say I like the look of the Lib Dem manifesto. I like the look of the Reform manifesto. So presumably you're not going to say that.
Well, I can do that to a degree if you want, but
can you really?
Yeah. Well, I'll try and be reasonably. What's the word? Not biased, but yes, not biased, basically. Yes.
Even-handed.
Even-handed. That's the word I'm looking for. It's not something that throws necessarily to a politician.
But I mean, you will get the headline: former Tory MPs suggests, you know, Lib Dems not as bad as previously thought.
No, yeah, no, I can do that.
Yes. Okay with that. All right. Okay, we'll go with that. Let's look at those manifestos. Start with Labour. Three things jump out at us. They want to ban trail hunting, they want to ban trophy imports, and one of them let slip, and I haven't fact-checked this, but there was a policy document that came out last week that suggested they would use money from gun certificates to fund social reform, which basically means they think gun owners are rich, which is probably a mistake. Those three things, how could they work for Labour? Will they do those three things, do you think?
I think it could work for Labour, but I think it's going to be very detrimental to the countryside, because I think, you know, people who need guns for both farmers, for vermin, and also for the shooting and conservation, and don't forget lots of livelihoods around here, lots of shoots, lots of hunts, trail hunts, then you link in the gymkhanas, you link in all the way of life of the countryside. Once you start to unravel all of that, it'll have a huge impact in these rural areas, because don't forget also it's linked into a certain amount of tourism, everything that comes with it. That's the problem, and I just don't think they understand what they're unleashing. And of course what they're unleashing is some red meat. Not they probably don't eat meat, but for the left of the Labour Party, that is what they're doing.
Red beet.
Yes, red beet or vegan cheese or whatever, I expect. But you know, whatever, that is the problem.
Okay, I mean, we see this as a wrecking ball, particularly the trail hunting side. We see this as a wrecking ball through rural society. They do see it as a way of cracking down on wildlife cruelty.
Yes, I mean, I think with trail hunting, you have to be as careful as possible. Make sure that foxes aren't picked up very often when you are trail hunting, but I actually think that the Hunting Act and what's happening now is working. I think that we have a countryside that's manageable, and I think in some ways they've got to a thing, they're not exactly licensed hunting, but it's in that sort of ballpark. I think it's far best left alone, and I think it'll only be dug up again for political reasons, nothing else.
From a practical lawmaking point of view, of which you have much experience, it's proved to be very difficult to ban hunting when you have to put a dog in the dock.
Yes, I mean, once you go out hunting, you know, once you go trail hunting, there's always the risk that you will pick up a fox. I mean, I think, you know, it's for those that are managing the hunt to make sure that they don't go out of their way to find a fox. Most don't, a few may. And like all of these things, I think you need to sort of stick to the rules, as most hunts do, in order to make it work, in order to it to be maintained. Because I think the riding through the countryside, all the hunters, all the horses that are bred for hunting, everything that goes with it, the stables, keeping the hounds, all of these things are really part of the fabric of the countryside, and I just don't want to see that all go, because you put a lot of people out of work, and you just change the shape. You know, are we going to become sort of a countryside that's completely urbanized? You know, I think Labour will alter some of the planning laws. We'll probably get, you know, more houses in the countryside. Well, some of it might be good, some of it may not be. And what are we looking for? Just an urbanized countryside that's cosmetic? We need the proper rural pursuits, and we need the shooting and conservation as well as the hunting, because this is helping with biodiversity, it's helping with the landscape, all of these things. It's farming, nature conservation, shooting, and hunting, all is part of the fabric of the countryside. But of course Labour don't want to see it that way.
We are going to lose the countryside eventually. I mean, that is the direction of travel, isn't it? I mean, urbanisation will take over. It's a philosophical point rather than a manifesto point, but surely you can't see a way that England in 1,000 years' time will not be concreted over.
I think we've got to delay the concreting over as long as possible. With all this online shopping, one of my pet themes is there is a real chance now to enhance and build up the town centres and have a lot of decent housing, produce some good housing in the middle of town centres. You know, every political party says we're going to maintain all the shops in a centre. No, we're not, because we all go online and buy. And the moment you go online and buy, you put a lot of shops out of business. And so there is a lot more to be done before we concrete over all of the countryside. Yes, we'll only be 15 to 20% of the country will be the rural population, but surely, you know, every minority now seems to be well protected. So why is it that the minority in the countryside, because we are a minority, is not being protected? In fact, quite the reverse, because they see us as a bunch of sort of upper class toffs, which is a load of rubbish. I mean, I milked cows when I was 13, and I've been in more SH1T than most people, perhaps politically as well. But, you know, seriously, it's a nonsense, this business that everybody that hunts, everybody who rides a horse is a toff, and it's class warfare. And you see he's sort of rounded on private schools, and then the next thing is hunting, shooting, fishing. He probably won't go for fishing quite as quickly, because it's sort of it's a more cross class, if you like, pursuit, or perceived to be. And I think this is the problem. It's all about perception, really, and it's perception of an urban party that sees the countryside in a certain light.
Manifestos are about perception. If you were elected as a Labour MP and given the job of banning trail hunting, how would you enact that legislation without banning dog walking?
I would find it difficult to because you see, once you the law they always say is an ass, but of course it needs to be interpreted. And what happens when our dogs go out with us and they chase a rabbit, chase a hare, chase something in the field? Are they hunting? Now you didn't set out to hunt, but it's an interesting thing in law, and I imagine the lawyers are probably, you know, rubbing their hands with glee at this moment for the amount of work that these poor underpaid barristers will be looking for. So you know, I've always had great sympathy for the poor underpaid barristers, and so they'll be looking for a great amount of work. You can tell I'm not about to be elected because I don't care who I offend.
The next manifesto to look at is the LibDems. They don't really say anything at all about hunting or shooting. They don't mention guns, they don't mention trail hunting, they don't mention trophy imports. Do they have a policy on the countryside? Is it wise just to avoid the subject altogether? Does it mean they don't care?
I don't think they don't care. The one bit of the Lib Dem agricultural policy I like is actually support for farming and support for food production, and I just don't think any of the political parties talk enough about it, the Tories included. So that bit I like. I imagine, you know, from being in Parliament, all right, there was only 12 Liberal Democrat MPs, but they are a mixed bunch. Some of them are very rural and would support the countryside pursuits. Others certainly wouldn't, and so I think you'll find when you vote Lib Dem or you get a Liberal Democrat MP, you can't be entirely sure what they are. I mean, there's some round here locally standing in Tiverton and Minehead. The Liberal Democrat there, she is actually pro-hunting, but you know, they do vary from seat to seat.
Does that matter politically? People always say they all need to be singing from the same hymn sheet. Does it matter if there is that level of dissent in the Lib Dem ranks?
Having sort of lived through a Tory party that, you know, has probably split itself completely down the middle, very difficult for me to make judgment on the Liberal Democrats, but they are very, very divided, and of course if they're not in government, that's not a problem. Their experience of coalition government with the Tories between 2010 to 15 means that they will never have that experience ever again. If it was to be a hung parliament, which I don't think it would be, but they would enter into a supply and confidence vote system. They would never go into coalition with anybody ever again because it was a nasty experience for them.
Let's look at the Green Party, which wants to ban all blood sports categorically, and it is not in the manifesto, but there was a policy paper saying they would like to ban the ownership of guns in private hands. What's there to recommend the Green Party?
No, I mean, the Green Party is like a tomato. It starts off green and then it turns red. It's the most socialist of all the parties standing, actually. And so, you know, if you want to vote for full-blooded socialism, then vote Green. But they will ban most things. In fact, you know, they'll probably try and ban our cars. We'll all be on bicycles. I mean, it's a nonsense because you need to have green policies and you need to look after the environment. But the idea that you could stop us all going about our work, and greens are interesting. I know a number of greens who are very green until they want to fly away to somewhere on an aeroplane, and then all of a sudden their greenness seems to disappear. So, you know, I'm afraid it's pure socialism. You know, it's all right for them to do it, but you mustn't. And I think if you voted Green in any great number, you would be very dangerous what you get. And for as far as, you know, banning hunting, shooting, the Greens are about banning things, aren't they? You know, whereas I would prefer to sort of offer carrots to change people's behaviour, whereas they like sticks, and the bigger the stick, the better.
So Labour says it wants to ban things, Tory says here's something we don't want to ban, Lib Dems haven't said anything about banning anything, Greens want to ban everything. There is one party which says it would like to enshrine country sports protected by law, and that is reform. It must be very difficult. I mean, you're a Parish, you're all right.
Yeah.
I'm a Jacoby. If they get in, I'm going straight to an internment camp. What do we do about reform? You know, they're the obvious choice for the country sports supporter.
Yes, they are in many respects, but of course the danger of voting Reform is you split the right-wing vote and Reform won't get in, Labour will get in and Liberal Democrats. I mean, the Labour and Liberals, the left wing of the left-wing vote must be laughing all the way to the bank at the moment as they see the Tory party and Reform split themselves down the middle. I have never seen it in 40 years of political life, have I ever seen the right-wing vote split. So therefore, any that are keen to vote reform. I respect their views, but just think of the consequences, and that's all I ask you to do. And don't come to me and complain afterwards when you've got a huge Labour majority supported ably by Liberal Democrats and you have no hunting, no shooting. Don't complain, because I'm afraid if we don't pull together as a right of centre vote, then we are nowhere. And I think, you know, Nigel Farage is having a lovely time. He's enjoying himself immensely. But I tell you what, as for politics on the right, we are just about going to hand over a huge majority to the left.
Now, you started by saying that a Labour government with a huge majority would have problems, would have structural problems. Is there a case to be made for going for that big Labour majority in the hope they destroy themselves, or is that not how Westminster works?
The trouble is that they may take a while to destroy themselves, and in the meantime they destroy us. That is the danger. And to start with, they'll be reasonably disciplined because of the fact that they haven't been in power for 14 years. Now, Labour does actually start, because many of them are from the union background, they do actually are more disciplined than the Tory party. Many of us run our own businesses. We are much more ill-disciplined. They're not. So discipline will be maintained, I rather fear, for long enough for maximum damage. And of course what Tony Blair used to do was send sort of half of them back to the constituency because he didn't have enough for them to do. And of course then they'll be looking for causes, and that's when we will be in real trouble, when the backbenchers go back looking for a campaign on banning hunting, banning shooting, banning virtually anything that doesn't suit their particular urban constituency. And don't forget, we complain about a politically correct Conservative government, but God help us with this lot. I mean, you should have a wonderful time, Charlie, being able to attack all the wokeism. You think it's woke now. I mean, I'm part of me is actually looking forward to it, because I think we can have a wonderful time being anti-woke. In fact, I think I might set up an anti-woke party when this is all over, because, there's got to be some blooming common sense. Are you a woman? Are you a man? What the hell are you? And what do I call you? This is the problem. I mean, now, as I'm not an elected politician, I largely don't worry too much what I call you, but that is a real problem, and it'll get worse. And I just hope there'll be a complete revolution eventually, that people will, those that are brought up as hippies are seldom hippies themselves. So I just hope that there'll be a complete reversal, and we will see an anti-wokeism come into being, so that we just stop it. But I just think it's going to be horrendous.
Ex-Conservative MP calls for revolution. It's better than I hoped.
Exactly. I could do with a revolution, actually. I feel I ought to have one. I feel one coming on, as they say.
I think those are the tanks rolling past now.
Yeah.